I am Jordan Schlansky, and I'm the associate producer of Conan. I've been told that I'm opinionated, which I guess I will agree with, considering that the alternative would be apathy. I have asked for your opinions on a variety of subjects simply to determine whether I agree or disagree. This opinion comes from I am Dave Luna. Luna, of course, is Latin for moon, a word that has influenced a lot of words even in English. Of course, lunar, which is a direct descendant. Also, lunatic, which many people don't realize that it used to be thought that the moon had an effect on human psychology based on its gravitational pull. In fact, some people still believe that, and therefore the word lunatic has derived from the Italian, Spanish, and originally Latin luna. In fact, the influence of Latin language on English most directly came from France, based on William the Conqueror's invasion of England, whereas French became the high-class language to speak, and English was considered the lower-class language. But of course, in the end, the two languages merged somewhat, and I believe the majority of vocabulary in English, even though English is considered a Germanic language because of the syntax, the majority of vocabulary to English comes from Latin roots. In fact, it's extended to this man's name, Dave Luna. Dave Luna says, "The Mandalorian is the best Star Wars Disney has made." I disagree, Dave. I love The Mandalorian. I've seen the first 3 episodes, and I'll go as far to say the first 2 were excellent. I thought the 3rd episode was a little trite. In fact, it started to remind me of a Star Trek The Next Generation episode, both generally and also specifically the 5th season Star Trek Next Generation episode called Silicon Avatar. And I almost considered it a cross between Silicon Avatar and the Star Trek Next Generation feature film called Insurrection. Very similar premise. In general, I love the series The Mandalorian. I love the way it's presented. There are certain little cinematic moments in it that don't necessarily directly further the plot, but to me are where the magic lies. I remember in the 3rd episode, there was just a shot of, I don't know if it was the Baby Yoda or someone looking up, just a shot of the trees going by with the sky behind it. And to me, there was a universe in that shot. That shot encapsulated the magic of the series. That shot was a moment of breath. It was negative space. It was the gray area in between the black and the white. It was the white of the page in between the written words. It was a moment to pause and reflect and understand that sometimes that's the way we see life. We see life looking up at the sky, and there's nothing directly happening to further the plot of our life, but that is perhaps where the magic lies. And in the absence of stimulation is where we can turn inwards and stimulate ourselves. But I disagree in the end, because I think the best Star Wars that Disney has made is the feature film Rogue One. I would say that Rogue One is the best Star Wars film since The Empire Strikes Back, in fact. Rogue One, as is well known, recaptures the look and the imperfections of the Star Wars universe as they were first presented in the original 1977 film. And the thing about Star Wars in later films is that it became less about Star Wars, in my opinion, and more about using Star Wars characters in an almost generic, very slick space action adventure movie. But to me, one of the biggest charms of the first Star Wars movies, let's say the original trilogy, were the imperfections, what Japanese call wabi-sabi. The things that are wrong became right. The fact that Darth Vader's helmet wasn't always on straight, the fact that it had scratches and dents in it. Even in the second film, if you look at Darth Vader's helmet in the original 1977 film and compare it to the 1980 Empire Strikes Back film, you have to understand that not only did the design itself change, the size of the chin vent and the widow's peak and the overall luster, but the Empire Strikes Back version was an idealized version. Everything was right. It didn't have one of the tusks was kind of damaged in the original film, and all these little touches kind of further the story and ground it in reality. Because you have to understand, when you're talking about Star Wars, this is something so fantastic and outside of our reality that it may be hard to relate to it. And if you can't relate to a story, some would argue that you can't truly appreciate that story. However, we were able to relate to such a supernatural set of circumstances because of the little touches that reminded us of our own lives, perhaps the little imperfections. Further than that, I remember John Williams has often talked about the fact that his score was deliberately grounded in 19th century romantic music to give us an emotional basis to connect with the film, as opposed to what may have been the conventional wisdom at the time, which would have been futuristic type synthesized music. Which again, in retrospect, because that movie pioneered so much and the soundtrack pioneered so much, now it seems obvious to have classical style music accompany a science fiction production. But first starting out, one may have thought that the opposite would be the way to go. Again, synthesizer, futuristic sound. But again, the imperfections in Star Wars were carried over into Rogue One. The production design really did a lot for that movie. And certainly the closing scene was incredibly dramatic, as anyone who has seen it knows. And Darth Vader's menace was, I thought, accurately presented, more so than perhaps in Revenge of the Sith, which would have been his first chronological appearance. But that said, I do love The Mandalorian, and I think both are great pieces of entertainment. This opinion comes from John Castleman, who says, mushy cereal is better than non-mushy cereal. I disagree with a condition. The condition being that I don't like any cereal, and I think all cereal is inherently unhealthy. And when we talk about cereal, we are presumably talking about packaged breakfast cereal, for example, the kind that's available in the United States, normally made with something like extruded wheat. Now, there's a concept which is highly valued in Italian cuisine, which is not often talked about in American cuisine, by contrast, and that is digestibility. The Italians will put a great emphasis on whether or not something is digeribile, which is digestible. And what that refers to is how easy is it for your body to process this food that you're putting into it. Breakfast cereal is a dry product. It is dried, it is hard, it is compacted. It is difficult for your body to digest, and because of that, no matter what the nutritional value may or may not be, no matter how many whole grains are in it, no matter how many vitamins it has been fortified with, or minerals, the fact is, it is hard for my body to digest it. It feels like it sits in me like a rock. It feels like it drains my energy rather than enhances it. By contrast, a digestible food, perhaps a food with its natural enzymes present, that pre-digest the food for you and eases the load on your own pancreas to produce its own digestive enzymes. A digestible food makes you feel light, makes you feel clean, makes you feel strong. Breakfast cereal is marketed as a healthy way to start the day. It's marketed towards children. Whether or not it has sugar, to me, it's always the wrong choice. Again, and the other thing to take into consideration is that it's all carbohydrate-based. So while I believe in food combining, I believe that carbohydrates should always be combined with a protein and ideally a vegetable. Many times breakfast cereal is eaten on its own, or whether or not it's eaten with milk, it's still a carbohydrate-based meal. And again, without the protein or fat or fiber to slow down the digestion of those carbohydrates, the release of sugar into the blood is objectionable, will raise the blood sugar, then that excess sugar gets stored as fat. Energy goes down once the sugar is removed from the blood rather abruptly by insulin secreted by the pancreas.